Action. Lift your legs up, please, gents. Cuando digamos acción, todos vendréis corriendo hacia acá.
The cool thing about these two episodes is that they are very much thematically linked in that they deal with rebirth. John comes back into the world naked, as if a baby at Castle Black in the cold. And Danny, naked, as if a child, but merging through fire and ice. And I did a lot of visual research. I looked at a lot of Renaissance paintings dealing with the resurrection. And my favorite painter is Caravaggio. Myself and the DP sat down and we talked about how can we emulate that feeling. That's great. So let me just see this action here. Okay, Kit, ready? And action.
Kit talked to us about the need for him to really feel what it feels like to remember your own death and how existentially terrifying that is.
I think I referred to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book on death and dying. And I said, why don't we take that in reverse? Because there's stages of disbelief and bargaining and acceptance. And I said, so let's start there. You wake up and some of the pieces are missing and you don't know where you are. And it becomes a series of discoveries. Where am I? Oh, well, I think I know where I am, and why am I naked? Then he looks down to discover that he has all these wounds. And then all of a sudden the memories start flooding back and panic ensues. So it really becomes sort of, how does John deal with what's happened?
He's been dead, and that's an experience that no one can understand unless it's happened to you, which means no one can understand.
What did you see?
Nothing. Nothing at all.
We go through the entire scene. He walks over to the rope, starts to lift the sword. Cut. We focused on how John would deal with the execution of Ollie.
It all comes back to Ned Stark, you know, the man who passes the sentence, swings the sword. I mean, it's the Northern ethos. John really doesn't want to do this. I mean, he's the justice of it is clear. I mean, these men assassinated the Lord Commander. They need to be executed, but he's the one who passed the sentence, and he's got to swing the sword.
Yeah, we did really drop them. It's always kind of chilling because your initial reaction as the audience is visceral. You know, they're in these harnesses that drop, and it is a little bit of a shock to the system.
You have to loosen this off. Yeah. Loosen the actual dressing rope.
The first time feeling that drop and the noise of the barrels being pulled back is terrifying when you're standing above it. It feels so real, and that obviously adds to the ability to act terrified during the scene.
Zafra Tower, which is in Guadalajara, Spain, it feels magical.
It almost looks surreal. I want everybody to know that it's real and that visual effects didn't do anything to it.
I remember sitting there on set reading on the history of this building, the way it was built against the Moors, and then the Moors took it, and then it was used in Spaniards fighting Spaniards, and all this brutal and bloody Thronesy history that was taking place right on the spot we were standing. Fights like the fight we were watching were happening probably where we were shooting this very fight.
Certainly they've done a lot of sword fights in this series. The question was, how would I make it different? I stumbled upon a Sergio Leone movie called Once Upon a Time in the West. And it's all about creating tension through anticipation of what's to come. And I thought, that's the key to this. You would see this tower and horses on a plain, and then you would start to hear the sound of a stone on a blade of a broadsword. It would sort of sync in rhythms with the horse's hooves, and then you would see these powerful horse's hooves. And then you would cut to a gleaming knight's helmet. And little by little, tease the audience into a sense that a mythic event is about to happen.
And now it begins. Now it ends.
David and Dan wanted the flashiest swordsman in the whole of the Game of Thrones world.
Sir Arthur Dayne is a legendary member of the Kingsguard under the Mad King, and reputed by many to be the greatest sword fighter in the history of the Seven Kingdoms.
He has two swords. He's got his own traditional sword, and he's also got the Dawn, which is basically his pride and joy, which is this sort of white blade.
It was really tricky to choreograph and execute and film a very complicated sword fight and make all of the cuts and all of the parries and all of the defenses and all of the kills look real and convincing while being flashed.
You stabbed him in the back.
The second part of it that made it a little trickier was that it is part of Bran's vision.
How does a boy having a dream, how does he interact in a landscape that he's not really meant to be there?
Father! Figuring out clever ways of transitioning the points of view and bringing Bran and the Three-Eyed Raven into the story and then taking them out so that each had its own specific linear narrative.
All of Danny's story, the vast majority of it was shot in the exterior world in Almeria, out in Spain. We had the gates of Dothrak were down there, the exterior of the village, as well as the exterior of the temple. And then we built the interior of it back here in the car park in Belfast.
They're going to bring me to Vaes Dothrak, and there's an argument that happens as to what they will do with me. My fate is being decided.
What happens is you sit down with these previous artists and you kind of pitch your vision for the sequence. And you present them the storyboards. You say, okay, well, we're going to burn the temple down from this angle, and I sort of want it to look like this and this. And then what's determined is how you approach that from standpoint, because the building's on fire, right? You can only put people in a certain proximity to that. So you have to shoot those as separate elements. So but you bring green screens in and green screens out. It ends up being so many different elements that you have to sort of keep your fingers crossed that what you end up with will be what you had envisioned in the prep process.
And I'm starting at this one.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Sure.
One of the big things that Dan Sackheim was really concerned about when he came to shoot the interior was how is it that this quite small girl is able to set this whole building on fire while she has 21 men around her.
So the notion I came up with was to topple these braziers to create an impenetrable line.
And then the matting would catch light, and then that would, travel up the walls, and then that would get to the roof.
Until she's sealed the temple and they can't get out. She's sort of trapping them all in this fiery tomb.
The interior burning was scary, genuinely frightening, where I was like, oh, I'm not fireproof, whoops. I forgot about that one.
When you light for fire, you need a lot of light to balance with the firelight. For the exterior, the way I approached it, I had the moonlight, ambient light, a little bit higher than I would usually.
What I wanted to do is have this building that had lots of combustible stuff on it, so when it burnt for real. I wanted to use this certain approach, which is like a liquid propane. Very explosive, very difficult, but incredibly aggressive, and looks beautiful when it's burning. And with the liquid propane coming through, makes it look like an inferno, a proper inferno.
We meticulously planned out every step of that process. We knew what we were starting with a bunch of green screen of the people watching it. We knew then we were going to go to the burning. We had plotted out where every single camera needed to go and which camera would be shooting, what action at what time.
It's kind of like a little bit of a carnival atmosphere where everyone, hundreds of extras and hundreds of crew members and the cast and the director and ambassador to Spain was there, and all of us just standing there watching the world's biggest bonfire.
They spent over 2 months building a temple that we burned to the ground in 2.5 minutes.
What's it like to watch something that we build burn? I think everybody finds that really satisfying. I don't think anybody at all is sentimental about it. We all enjoy that for what it is. That's part of the fun of the job.
The sequence when the White Walkers and the Whites attack the cave of the Three-Eyed Raven was an incredibly complicated sequence to figure out.
I knew that it was going to be a lot of stunts, a lot of CGI. How were we going to do it?
It's all the different departments coming together to create this nightmare scenario. So you've got the stunt team with the various fights. You've got the special effects team with the fires. You've got the visual effects with the Whites crawling on the ceiling.
It's a lot of different elements in play.
My goal was to make it realistic, make it terrifying, and make Hodor's sacrifice incredibly moving.
The Three-Eyed Raven Cave we first established at the end of season 4. It was very difficult to shoot in, but we only had a 2-day shoot.
It had been designed for, the actors to escape to, and then we cut away. So it wasn't very stunt friendly at all. So we kind of had to sort of pull it all apart, create new tunnels.
And for this year, we had to have a secret exit for the cave just to follow the ending of that episode and the storyline that goes with that.
The children of the forest are basically in a very thin prosthetic, so we had to try and make the floor a bit friendlier for that, because obviously we're gonna kill them and throw them on the floor and things like that. But it's very small. It was very clubby filming in there. It was a bit of a mission.
Arrow!
If there's going to be an actor going by an explosion at night, we better see the effect of that light on him. The children of the forest have these round grenades that have been established in the show. They had designed these flat panels of light that the actors and extras would walk by, and explosion 1, and the light would light up from the ground. So the interactive light would hit. Then we did a pass with just the explosions. Then we did a pass with just them and stunt guys reacting. We shot many cold nights out of Magamorn to do all that stuff.
When we do explosions inside a small contained set, you've always got to worry about air expansion. We're working with this system that's actually igniting dust. What we ended up using was cork dust and charcoal dust, fired out of an air mortar in front of a flame, ignites into a lovely fireball. And it was off a Leaf's grenade explosion in the tunnel. It's such a confined little space. You do your explosion passes, there's no one there.
Action!
And then you do your passes where you've got people there, but they need to have interaction.
Go!
You put that shot and then the previous shot of explosion, and you've got everything you need.
At any one time during the cave, we had so many characters which were going to be in prosthetics. We had the Night King, 3 White Walkers, 6 Children of the Forest, including the hero Leaf, and countless Whites.
Anytime we create a creature is very difficult.
The Children of the Forest are fully covered from head to toe. They're glued completely into these prosthetics all over their body.
It took so long to get the Children of the Forest in their brilliant makeup and costumes. It was really challenging.
If I were to do a full body prosthetic, I'll get picked up at midnight, and then I'll be on set by 10 a.m. So it takes about 9-10 hours. I didn't realize it's going to result to 9.5 hours of makeup.
It is an extraordinary thing that we ask of them, but then you see them all made up and it's like, okay, that was worth it. They're incredible.
Ready? Here we go. Action!
The cave sequence this year is kind of like a chase sequence. We've got Hodor and Mira and Bran on the run through the escape tunnel. They're being chased by skeletal and half-dead Whites. And not only on the ground, they're also being chased on the ceiling.
There's an image that Dan and David and Jack were very, very keen on, but just to get it as crazy and as terrifying as we could, the Whites are not only running on the floor, but they're crawling on the walls, they're crawling on the ceiling. So we worked with the art department to build an inverted walls and ceiling section of the tunnel.
It took a lot of interdepartmental planning to get that right.
We had to leave room with green screen when we were shooting, frame-wise, to have them crawling on the ceiling.
Our great stunt team put their heads together on how to suspend the white stunt performers. So it's a bungee rig. They can cross over each other. They can pile onto each other.
They're going to be everywhere. That's something that's going to end up, I hope, being really creepy.
Hold the door!
There's a door between these whites and between Mira and Bran getting away. That's when I'm told to hold the door, which turns into Hodor, and it was just like a genius.
George told us about this, that hold the door was the origin of the name Hodor.
And I just remember Dan and I looking at each other when he said that and just being like, holy shit.
The intensity of the moment for Hodor, his own death moment, finding its way back through time, is short-circuiting young Willis and turning him into Hodor.
It's one of those things that, you know, didn't ever occur to me before he told us that, and then it all makes sense.
We just thought that was a really, really cool, kind of heartbreaking idea.
The big climactic cave sequence was hugely complex, and although it's very scary that this really terrifying thing is happening to our characters, at the end of the day, I think the emotion and what we're experiencing is hopefully going to be the shock that people will stay with.
Oh, it's mortifying. It's so sad.
I had the call. I knew what was going to happen to Hodor, but when I got the script, it was a really difficult scene to read.
Hodor was just, as we know, a totally normal kid who was then sort of screwed over by Bran. It's going to break people's hearts.
When I first read the script and I read the section about Hodor and how he got his name and what happens, that was a really cool and totally unexpected thing for me. I didn't think that we'd ever even find out.
It's definitely a sad moment, but I like what he's done, that he sacrificed himself for his friends. It feels very true to Hodor for me, but it's really sad.
That's a series wrap shot for Mr. Hodor.